Hi everyone, this is Meredith Slota, and this is my linked open data and SPARQL presentation. The data set I chose was based largely on my immediate future plans, namely summer vacation and watching a lot of movies, because I feel like I've spent so much time on homework that I've really missed out. Not to mention that there are tons of really great movies that I've never actually seen. So to get my initial data set, I went to Wikipedia and started looking up Academy Award-winning movies. And I found the Academy Award page that talks all about the history of the ceremony, etc., etc. But it also has this really great data set about the award ceremonies, namely the ceremony, the year, date it took place, and who won Best Picture that year. So this is a really great data set for me to start off with because I would like to know more about really great movies. So I pulled this data set into I actually did. So the ceremony I kept the same. The date I trimmed down to just the year using the column editing features in Refine. I added a new category, or I added a new column called category to indicate that all of these movies won for this specific category. And that was largely because in the future you could add winners of different categories and you might want to distinguish them depending on which category they won for. And I also added a result column that, and of course the film. And then the last bit of data that I added is the IMDb ID number. And I'm going to click over to IMDb right now and show you how I got that, which is basically by looking up every movie and then pulling the ID from the URL. And that's really useful because IMDb has a lot of really great structured data that we could pull in for future applications. The downside is that it doesn't validate right now. You can't reconcile this, and that's because of some recent changes with Google Refine. You used to be able to look things up in the IMDb namespace, and then all of these IDs would have validated. But it's actually currently broken, so that's a bummer, but I'm leaving it here because it might validate in the future. I reconciled ceremony, category, and film, as well as scrolling to the right here, the venue, because all of those things had unique identifiers in DBpedia. And real quick, I did use the details. And these were the ones that were the most challenging to reconcile because the films usually represented works of other kinds, either books or plays or soundtracks or just multiple entries for the same film. So I wanted to be really careful that I was getting the right one here because it has a lot to do with the data that I pull back. So I didn't want to get remakes of movies, for 50 years later. So you'll just have to trust me that these are all reconciled properly. So from there, I exported the file and ended up with my RDF file, which should be pulling up. I hope it's pulling up. Where are you? There you are. Okay, so here is my RDF file in all of its Cody glory. And I'll show you the RDF skeleton when we get back there, but I'm using Sublime Text, which highlights everything really nicely so you can see where your data is chunking out. I'll go back to Chrome. So the RDF skeleton that I'm using is really only leveraging the linked data, but I'm not deleting the other things just because they might come in handy later. I didn't reconcile the hosts because they had multiples. And I didn't want to delete any data, so I'm just not using that for now, but I'm leaving it in there. My RDF skeleton looks like this. So I'm using the year with the DC Terms date and the film for the text as DC Terms title, but I'm using the OWL same as to get the URI, and here I'm using that custom expression where if it's matched, it's showing. I did reconsider redoing it based on Andy's presentation to do the if error then, but this data all reconciled, so I didn't do it for this one, but I think that would be useful in the future just in case things either don't have entries yet or aren't reconciling properly. You don't just lose that data, it just shows up as text. I think that's really cool. So thanks, Andy. I am making my own term called event for the ceremony, and also category for the Best Picture category. And then I'm adding the DC Terms identifier to link to the value of the IMDb cell, which once that reconciles, we can change it to a URI, but it won't work as a URI right now. So previewing it gives you this, which is the same as what I showed you in Sublime Text, but only the first 10 rows. So that's fine, and we will move over to validation. I am cheating a little bit here. There were actually 85 rows of data in my original data set, but when I validate using all of them, the graph doesn't work. It's too much data. So here I'm validating just the first 50, so it's a little bit cheating, but the rest of it does validate, I promise. So we will parse the RDF and get some really nice giant text. So everything validates successfully, and we can jump down to the graph and see what that looks like. It's going to take just a second. So there it is. Here are all of our linked data bits going into my iSchool IDs. So that works out really nicely. And then I can move into SPARQL to show you how I would use something like this in the future. I'm starting off with the SPARQL query using all of my restricted namespaces, and conveniently enough, DBpedia has a category called Best Picture Academy Award Winners. So let me just go ahead and open that. It does recreate the list that I have, but it doesn't have the data that I have in my list, namely years, etc. So what we're working with is this list of films that all won an Academy Award at some point. So this is a very, very useful category, and I'm going to pull all of my Follow Me data from this list on the assumption that it recreates my original data set pretty well. So my SPARQL query is selecting unique terms, any of them where a film falls on this category, has a DC term subject. And if we click into one of those files, just for one of those movies, you can see tons and tons of data. And if you scroll down to subject, it has a whole bunch. But right here is the one I'm after, this category Best Picture Awards. So that's great. We're going to get everything there. Okay, so we're going to run this query, and it's really cool. And it gives us the same list, but an Academy Award for Best Picture, not a film. So we're going to have to do some filtering, and also I want to be able to pull in some more data into this query. So working off of this base query, we're going to add a few more things, and I will show you my final query that I ended up with for now. And it's the same category restriction, and what I'm pulling in is the name. I had to make some decisions here because there are a bunch of different types that could have this name of the film, but name typically had the least number of entries in English, so I was trying to restrict duplicates here. So I went with the friend of a friend name category instead of RDF type or the DBpedia property of the name, because those always turned up multiples and my data set just got out of control. I'm also including optional data bits about release date. That's here, and that has to be optional because many of the films, especially earlier films, don't have release dates in DBpedia. Additionally, many films have 2 release dates, and I'm not sure why that is, but I think it might be film and then to DVD or something like that, but they're not differentiated, so that's some interesting data confusion. I also wanted to pull in director in case I wanted to watch only movies where the director had won multiple awards for this movie, start with the best, I guess. And then I also wanted to pull in abstract because many of the movies, especially earlier ones, I just don't know a lot about. So I want to be able to read about the movie itself in order to decide whether or not I want to watch it right away. And I'm also saying I want to pull in RDF type and call it type. And there's a reason for that, because I ended up getting lots and lots of duplicates because these films were in this listing with both actual parentheses for the ones that had, let's see, let's go back to my, so some of these have, you know, the year in the DBpedia ID, and these are always duplicates because some of them have the URI with parentheses and some of them have the URI with the HTML code for parentheses instead. And so that was really problematic. So instead, what I'm doing is, going back to this query, I'm pulling in RDF type, calling it type, and then I'm filtering. Because we have duplicates for language issues, and then we have duplicates for RDF type, and I'll go back and show you that one of those ones that has multiple types. So if you scroll down, you can see, so I limited the RDF type to film, and I also filtered the abstracts to English because you end up with, you know, 15 different abstracts based on the number of languages that are available. So here's that query that I ended up with, and I'm going to zoom out so you can see I end up getting a nice little alphabetical listing because I ordered it on the name that includes director and abstract, limiting by film, and let's make that smaller. So I can read all about this. That's probably too small to read, but you get the picture. There's tons of data here. It would be really useful. If I could link to IMDb, then I could pull in ratings and things like that too. So that'll be for a future project. Thanks so much for listening. And again, this is Meredith Slita. This was my presentation on linked data. This was a really fun project. So have a great summer, you guys. Bye.